All right, guys, welcome back to Intro to Python. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about if statements and booleans. Now, just to get started, remember a boolean variable has a possible value of true or false. So we can say is true equals false equals true, or sorry, we can say is tall equals true, or is tall equals false. Now, an if statement kind of takes advantage of that. So, for example, if we do if, we can say if is tall. Print you're tall. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's run this, and we get you're tall. If we change this to false, we get nothing because it's not, is tall is false, so we're just getting nothing. We can also say if is tall, print you're tall, else print you're not tall. Okay, so let's go ahead and run that. So is tall is false. So we checked if is tall, and right here we get false. So we go to print you're not tall. This is basically saying if is tall is true, print you're tall, otherwise, else is like otherwise, print you're not tall. Now, if we change this back to true, then we're just going to get you're tall because it was true. So if is tall is true, print you're tall, otherwise, print you're not tall. That's how an if statement works. Now, there are a few caveats. The first is after the if like statement right here, and then else, you need to have colons. And then underneath the if statement, you need to tab everything. So maybe you say print you're tall, print hello, whatever. Everything that applies to this conditional. So everything that we want to do if is tall is true needs to be tabbed. And the same is true for else right here. Okay? So these alone themselves are not going to be tabbed, but everything inside will be tabbed. And that's kind of the basic rule for if statements, but also while loops and for loops, which we'll go over next. So let's take a look at something a little bit more complex. We're going to say height equals 170 centimeters. Okay. We can say if height is greater than 170, colon, print you are taller than 170. Else, we can say height, we can say print you are 170 or less. So right here we have an inequality, which you probably recognize from math class, and that is just what's called a Boolean operator. So we can say if height is greater than 170, you are taller than 170, otherwise you're 170 or less. If we had greater than or equals to, we could say you are 170 or taller. You are 170 or taller. And here you could say you are less than 170. Now, the important thing to note right here is that this is really no different from where we had is tall equals true or false. Okay, so if we did, let's say, for example, we did height is tall equals height is greater than or equal to 170, we could do the same thing right here, and we would get the same output. Or is taller than 170. Okay. Now, one thing that's interesting to do, let's kind of go back to the way it was before, just to, all right, we've got height, okay. Let's say we change it to, so let's just run this right now and just see what we get. So right here, we'll kind of get rid of this here. So right here, you've got you are 170 or taller. If we had this one, we would say you are less than 170, or it should be you are 170 or shorter. Okay. If we change this to 169, what do you think we're going to get? Or 168? You are 170 or shorter. So that's kind of how a slightly more complex if statement works. Now let's look at something that is even more complex. So adding a little more complexity here. Let's say we have is hair blonde equals true, and height equals 154. Now we can say if is hair blonde and height is greater than 150, print your hair is blonde and you're over 150. Okay, so I gotta put if right here. So we have and. That means both of these conditions have to be true. So is hair blonder needs to be true, which it is obviously since we marked it right here, and height also has to be greater than 150. Both of these have to be true. So we can say else your hair is not blonde, or is not blonder, or you're over, or you're under 154. Okay. So right here, notice we put or. So for this to be false, only one of these has to be false. Either is hair blonder has to be false, or height is greater than 150 has to be false. So right now, let's just go ahead and run this. And we have your hair is blonder and you are over 150. It's kind of hard to see, but that's it. Okay. Now let's just make one of these false. So your height is still over 150, but is hair blonder is false. So your hair is not blonder, or you're under 154. You can't see the whole thing, but that's basically the gist of it. Now let's look at another example. We've got these two right here, and we're going to change this to an or. Okay, so you have an or that means at least one of these has to be true. So one or both of these has to be true. So if is hair blonder, so you can say if is hair blonder or height is greater than 150, your hair is blonder or you're over 150. Else, otherwise, your hair is not blonder and you're under 154. So basically, for us to get to else, for this whole thing to be false, both of these have to be false. All right. So for example, if you put false and we put 149, go ahead and run that, you're going to get your hair is not blonder or you're under 154. If only one of these is true, you're still going to get this statement right here. Okay. We're going to use, in our next example, we're going to use a different operator and we're going to get some user input. So let's say we have height, first height, equals int. Well, this should probably be a float actually. Input, first height. We're not going to get too crazy here. And then second height equals float, input, second height. So let's say we're going to say if first height, and we're going to use a different Boolean operator here, is equal to second height. Print you're the same, else print you're different. So let's go ahead and do that. So right here, first height is going to be 23, and then we'll say 23. So you're the same. 49 and 50, you're different. So this is just an example using user input. The other thing we can do is we could do not equals. So we could say, and that way we would just switch So this means first height. If first height is not equal to second height, print this, else print this if they're the same. We're not going to execute it. I think that's actually pretty self-explanatory. The next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to do an exercise involving something called an Elif. Now, let me just kind of illustrate how an Elif works. So math exam score 1 equals, we're going to say int input score 1, and we'll make that a little bit tidier, I guess. Equals int input score 2, and we're going to say if math exam score 1 is greater than or equal to 65, print you passed. This might be, the scenario here might be like you need a certain score, certain scores on your exams in order to pass a course. So you can say you passed. Now, we're going to say Elif math exam score 2 is greater than or equal to 75. Print you passed. So what this means is else if. So we'll say the way that we could read this in English is we could say if your math exam score 1 is greater than or equal to 65, then you pass. Otherwise, meaning if it's not greater than 65, if it's not greater than or equal to 65, if your math exam score 2 is greater than or equal to 75, you passed. So we only reach Elif in the case where this first part right here is false. So if this is false, then we're going to check this next condition and then do something else, okay? So we're going to have one more Elif, and we're going to say Elif math exam score 2 2 plus math exam score 1. So we'll go ahead and put those in parentheses. I'm going to move this over here for a second. Are greater than or equal to 90 together, print you passed. So if both of this means if both of these are false, then we check this condition. And if the sum of math exam score 2 and math exam score 1 are greater than or equal to 90, we can say print you passed. And then if all of those are false, we'll go to else and we'll say, you just failed. All right. Let's go ahead and try this out here just to kind of test this out a bit. So let's say you get, so this is score 1, you get a 70, and you get a 21. You still passed because you hit this condition. Let's run it again. Let's say you get a 59. So you didn't pass the first condition, but you get a 76 on your next exam. Okay, you passed. Now let's run this again. And let's say you get a 45 and a 45, which fails both these conditions. But right here, it matches up with this one. You run it. I'm just going to go ahead and stop that and then run that. 45 and 45. And then you pass, okay, because it equals at least 90. Now let's say you get 45. Let me run this again. 45 and 39. You failed because you didn't meet any of these conditions, right? So that's how an Elif works. Basically, if the condition above is false, then we evaluate the condition on Elif and see if it's true. Otherwise, we just keep going. In other programming languages, this is actually like replaced by a switch statement. No, not exactly, but there are other, let me put it this way, there's just other structures that we can use, other conditional statements we can use in different languages to handle a similar scenario. Now, let's go ahead and let's do some exercises. Let's start out with a simple one. So it'll be exercise 1. So let's say that a student wants to get a smoothie. Get the cost. If it's greater than $5.99, print too expensive. Otherwise, print you can afford it. Okay, so let's say cost equals float. And then if cost is greater than $5.99, print too expensive. Else print okay. Go ahead and run it. Say, okay, we have a problem right here. Okay, so float. It's got to be input. Okay, cool. We need another set of parentheses. Let's go ahead and run that. Okay, let's say we enter 6. Too expensive. Good. All right. Just remember with these exercises, you should actually like read the exercise, pause the video, and then do it, and then start the video again, and then see the solution. So let's take a look at exercise 2. So what we want to do actually is we're going to say enter in your grade. So by grade, that means like what year you're in school, okay? And we can say, or I guess we should say allow the user to enter grade. User to enter grade. So what we want to do now is we want to print out what school they're in. And this is maybe a bit of an American concept, but if grade is from 0 to 5, print elementary school. If grade is from 6 to 8, print middle school. If grade is from 9 to 12, print high school. So the first thing you want to do is you want to get the grade. So let's say grade equals, and this has to be an integer. Okay. Next we're going to say, okay, if grade is greater than or equal to 0, and this one's actually kind of important, and grade is less than or equal to 5, then we can print elementary school. So if that's not true, Elif grade is, so we can just say greater than 5. So that's going to be 6 and above, so greater than 5. And grade is less than or equal to 8. Print middle school. Elif grade is greater than 8, which is automatically going to be 9. And it's going to be 9 because we can only enter integers. And grade is less than or equal to 12. Print high school. Else, if it's none of those things, print invalid grade. So, I mean, that could be that it is like 13 or -1 or whatnot. So any possible grade should fit into one of these categories. So this is going to be a range from 0 to 5. This is going to be a range from 6 to 8. This is going to be a range from 9 through 12. Okay? We're using the AND here crucially, so it has to meet all of these criteria. That means that anything, really at the end of the day, anything that's not greater than or equal to 0 or less than or equal to 12 will fall right here as an invalid grade. So let's go ahead and run that and see what issues, if any, there are. So let's enter 13, for example. That's an invalid grade. Let's enter -1, invalid grade. What about 12? High school. Okay. Anyways, this was I think, a good illustration of using Elif using if, using Boolean operators, as well as and statements. We didn't use or, but if you watched the previous section on or, then you have a pretty good idea of how that works. Anyways, if you found value in this tutorial and you want to see more like it, please like and subscribe. Have a nice day.